So, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, welcome to this fire chat discussion, and I'm super happy to have you all here today. And of course, the protection of minors online is one of the biggest societal issues I think we've been facing in the last few years. And I think having all these people on the panel is going to, we're going to be able to get down to a good level of discussion here. So first of all, Dame Melanie Dawes is executive chief executive of OFCOM, and of course OFCOM is also a bit like the EU, because all the tech companies that provide services in the UK need to respect the rules of the UK. So it's also leading in a lot of areas, and has an Online Safety Act, which is very similar to the Digital Services Act. So it's super good. Of course, Renate and Nikolay I don't need to introduce, and we have Jeremy, who is also executive chairman of Coimisiún Meán, which is the Irish media and digital regulator, and of course the home to so many tech companies. And so, of course, de facto country of origin principle, a lot of the tech companies also need to comply, of course, with the rules of Ireland. So I think we need to start with the idea of a social media ban. I mean, I think we can't get around it. And every day we read in the newspapers that there's a new country that's proposing a social media ban, and it's something that's happening worldwide as well, with Australia, with Canada, with Brazil. All sorts of countries are beginning, of course, to move in that direction. So despite the DSA, despite the Online Safety Act, is something that's happening. And I'd like to ask Melanie Dawes to talk about the recent announcement made just a week ago by Sir Keir Starmer, ex-Prime Minister of the UK, to introduce a social media ban. So maybe you could walk us through a little bit what you know about it and what your role is going to be.
Sorry, I was taking the mic before you'd finished there. I was just holding it at you. Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here. It's today is the 10th anniversary of the day that Britain voted to leave the European Union. And so it feels really good to be here in Brussels with European colleagues, but also with many from other countries across the world, partners that we work very closely with. So it's good to be here and to be with you. Look, Ofcom is the UK's long-standing communications regulator. We've always regulated telecoms and media. It's always good to get some telecom stories introduced at an event like this at the beginning, even though a lot of what we're talking about is very much more about the services that the public are interacting with in the modern world. So, as you say, last Monday, Keir Starmer, who remains our Prime Minister for a little while longer, in fact, announced the conclusions of our government that we will have a social media ban. And why is that? Well, it's very, very simple. It's because there is overwhelming public clamour for a ban. The government had a response to their consultation where they had also proposed approach of banning functionalities for under 16s like live streaming and direct messaging and so on, addictive algorithms. But there was an overwhelming public support for a ban of particular services. And I think there's something about the UK context where that direct engagement with the public is just very, very clear in our political system. And so that's why we are where we are. And although, as Renate was saying earlier, the UK's existing Online Safety Act, which is already very ambitious in improving protections for adults and children, that framework is very much the sister of the Digital Services Act. It is about systems and processes being required, about a duty of care. It is not about moderating individual bits of content as the regulator or taking direct complaints ourselves. Although that is the case, I think when it comes to the social media ban, the UK inspiration is definitely Australia. There's a clarity about what's happened in Australia, the speed with which they've introduced the ban. So we have a few months to go now of work that the government will lead to produce secondary legislation to set out which services will be covered, to set out also whether there are additional requirements on functionalities, to work out what happens to kids aged 16 and 17, We, in particular at Ofcom, and I'm sure we'll come on to this, will be providing public advice on age assurance. So a ban at 16 is actually all about age assurance. It's about that working. And I think the Australians have already gone quite a long way, very much building actually on what Ofcom did in bringing age assurance in across the porn industry. We're very much handing the baton to and fro here now as regulators, as we each do different things. But making age assurance, effective at age 16, we'll come on to that. That's that you can't have a ban unless you can get that change in.
Thank you. Maybe Jeremy, thank you for that, Melanie. We'll get back to that, of course. But I just want to have a first round so everybody can put forward their position before we go into more nitty-gritty questions. So, Jeremy, what's your position? What's Ireland's position, I suppose we're going to talk about Ireland in general, about a social media ban. What do you think? Because, we've got a lot of national legislation, beginning to emerge in the member states with I suppose, a possible internal market issue. But you've got to enforce those rules in the country of origin. So what would you like to see about a social media ban?
Okay, well, can I just start off by, again, thanking you for inviting me today. I can't think over the last 13 years that I've been involved in European regulation how many occasions Philippe has come and facilitated or emceed or participated in conferences I've organized. So it's great to be able to repay that debt. So let me just start off by saying that. I think in terms of a social media ban, I might start off by saying that the DSA, as Renate said, for me, one of the jewels in the crown of what the DSA has achieved are the guidelines on keeping children safe. So compared to a few years ago, we now have a really clear idea of what features of services cause harm. Melanie talked about some of them: addictive design features, contact from strange adults, toxic feeds, I would add, exposure to adult-only content, all these kind of things. So we know what those are. And Renate talked about the 2-year cycle from investigation to fining. So I think the reason we're seeing pressure for a social media ban is that the timetable for regulation to have an impact on behavior is slower than the political agenda. And so that is what we are seeing. Now, Ireland's position, and the Irish government's position, is this should be done at a European level. It is pointless to have 27 different regimes. We ought to do this in a coherent European level. But I think there's a real question about what is it you are banning. You can talk about a ban, but the question is, what do you ban? So actually, personally, I think Commissioner Meán, we're in favour of a better ban. Not an Australia-style ban, but a better ban. And it's really about taking the principles of the DSA and the DSA guidelines. And the thing we should ban is not our services with features that are harmful to children. That's what should be banned. And I think we see the advantage of that is that it, I think, Melanie, you talked about the overwhelming support for a ban. Of course, if you talk to every NGO or expert about who's advocates for children or who works with children, they are almost all against a ban. So I think there's concerns about the effectiveness of a broad ban. So if we ban the services with harmful features, that makes for much quicker enforcement. It provides an opportunity for services to be developed which support the development of children. So children deserve a healthy online environment. They're not getting it. So what we can do is we have the ban around features, and then I think we can think about how do we enforce such a ban. So Melanie's of course quite right. You need to have age assurance. It doesn't matter what you're banning. If you don't know who children are, you can't protect them online. But we could borrow, for example, from the product safety regime. Services that are going to be offered to children maybe should have a CE mark. They should have to demonstrate their conformity with rules. So I think our sense is you have a ban. you don't do it just by having whole categories of services. You tie it to the features.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And I think it's good because none of the jurisdictions that are covered here have actually got a social media ban yet. So I think it's really good that we can actually discuss, what is it that could be banned? Because as far as I can understand, in the UK, you haven't got legislation yet either. So maybe turning to Renate, of course, you know what the situation is. We all know the situation. Jeremy said the only solution is an EU solution. What would Jacques Delors make of this internal market fragmentation at the moment that we've got? And how do you think, it should be addressed logically?
Well, I think if we look a year back, where indeed we had an important fine moment in our DSA work together, because we issued the guidelines. The guidelines on Article 28 of the DSA, which kind of says there's a high level of safety and security and privacy for children. But that's an important statement to make. But how do you fill that with life?
Yeah, and it didn't stop internal market fragmentation.
And the guidelines were an important piece of work and were already the result of an inclusive process where we got a lot of important players when you're talking about minor protection online around the table. Because when you're talking about it, it's at the same time talking about protecting kids from online harm, but also kind of respecting their rights of participation. So you have to kind of balance that out. And when you're kind of designing the right approach to this, you need to have all of those in the room. So where are we now? I think indeed there was a lack of, patience of kind of member states. It's a highly debated political issue wherever you are in the world, but also in all of our member states. It goes up to the level of prime ministers. And it's very clear that there's a willingness to kind of move forward. The last informal telecom council, end of April, has clearly shown that the majority of the member states want us to move on this together in a harmonized way. So in a kind of Jacques Delors way. Where are we? We're paying tribute to the initiative that our president has taken, President von der Leyen, who announced last year in the State of the Union address that there would be an expert panel looking at that. The co-chairs of the expert panel, a French and German professor, we had 3 important expert panel discussions. I was on all of them. Again, it was a very inclusive process with child rights advocates, but also data scientists, psychiatrists, you name it, a really wild kind of, broad kind of debate, including the youth, because that's important too. Not only talk about them, but with them about what they want. And really, I'm very comfortable that we will have very substantial recommendations coming on the 13th of July from these 2 co-chairs. And of course, they will then influence what we do next. There's a lot of debate about, the upcoming AVMSD review, which was a possibility to get inspired, for instance, by the Irish Online Safety Code, but also other pieces to kind of maybe update the content, because that's the only kind of, law that we have where we actually speak about what content we want kids to be kind of protected from. There's discussion about a Digital Fairness Act that is necessary because we need to update our consumer key to the kind of the new reality. And then there might be a need to do something more. It's very clear that the age gate is not off the table, but it's also very clear that that is not a panacea. Because what we are learning from the enforcement work, if you take an important case that I'm very, very proud of, our preliminary findings in the TikTok addictive design case, that is very, very clearly building on the guidelines and making it very clear what are the kind of addictive design features that we don't want to see, that we have issues with. The infinite scrolling, the kind of the lack of disruption, no mandatory curfews. So you can already kind of from that take some inspiration, what you might want to do in a really kind of more children-friendly and teenage-compatible kind of business model that you want to design, even if you have a social media delay. But then when the kids at whatever age, 14, 15, 16, come online, they're still vulnerable and they still need to kind of probably be protected from certain kind of, models. And we have a chance now at building on these recommendations, building on the enforcement of the DSA and the risk-based approach to maybe go a little further and to say, this is the do's that we want, this is the don'ts that we want. And then it makes sense. So to only speak about the age gate would be a bit short-sighted because you need to help them to kind of, become a resident in this digital space in the best protected way. And that goes the whole way from the kind of age gate to the 18.
Yeah, thank you. But still what I still hear from Jeremy, I think, is that if he seems to be more inclined to talking about age gating certain features and not the whole service. Is that how I understood you, Jeremy?
So I think we will be able to divide services into two categories.
Yeah.
Ones that are suitable for children and ones that are not.
So a bit like the Canadian approach.
Yeah, I mean, we've done this for films for years. You can't go and see a film. If you're under 18, you can't go and see a film that is rated 18, but we don't ban children from the cinemas. So I think it's quite simple. We don't just age gate features. If you want to have a teen account or a teen version of your service that doesn't have addictive design, doesn't have infinite scrolling, doesn't have any of those features that are dangerous to children, you should have that version of your service. That version does not require an age gate. That version is suitable for children. Mm-hmm. If you want to have a service, if you choose to have your service that has these dangerous features, maybe they're dangerous to adults as well, but we protect children. We allow adults to make up their own minds to expose themselves to dangerous things. So I think for me, it's not age gating features; it is age gating services that include dangerous features.
Got you. Okay. All right. Thank you. Melanie, so let's get back now to the age verification. You said initially that was the biggest, that's how you do it, basically. So you've had quite a lot of experience already about age verification in relation to porn platforms. And I also read in the FT last week, one of your colleagues said that it was going to be incredibly more difficult, in fact, to introduce age verification to check people who are at least 16. So maybe you could share with us a bit your insights about how you're going to go about it and how complicated it's going to be to introduce these age verifications.
Thank you. Can I just say, look, I kind of agree with everything you've been saying, but I think in my country, and I suspect in many of yours too, parents are just absolutely fed up with a more technocratic conversation, and they are frightened. Their kids they don't know what's going on in their kids' lives. And they feel this is massively urgent. So there is an emotion that is there, I think, in families, particularly with parents of younger children up and down the country. And there is a total lack of trust that Silicon Valley is going to fix this, because it hasn't for more than 20 years. So, and we may come on to the experiences we've had of regulation. We've all made progress here and there on different things, but we're pushing uphill. And in a way, with AI coming along and increasing risk. So culturally, these companies are not where we need them to be. And that's why I think so many countries are now going to something more draconian. I acknowledge that. And it may be that we get more draconian for a while. And then when we put the fire break in place, we can start to have a more sophisticated system in the future. But I just wanted to give you my sense. Maybe there's something about the UK. There's a very direct connection with families in the way our political system works. And it's just interesting. So on the question of age checks. So I'm incredibly proud of what Ofcom's done here. In January 2024, we published for consultation guidance on how highly effective age assurance could and should work across particularly the porn industry, because we have requirements there. Offline, online need to be the same. Kids shouldn't see what they shouldn't see. And everybody said it's not going to work. They said it won't. It really was almost universal. Some of our regulatory colleagues were thinking in the same way, but I think you were all a little bit more skeptical about whether we were going to be able to make it work. In the US, the FCC and the FTC couldn't see how this could ever be made to be consistent with privacy laws. And across the industry, everyone said it needs to be done at the operating system or app store level. It'll never work at the service level. So our laws didn't allow us to do anything at the system level. I do think that's going to be needed, by the way. But what we've done in only 2.5 years, in fact, in 1.5 years, our rules came into force at the end of July last year, and we have got 2/3 of the top 100 porn companies in the UK with highly effective age checks. We'll be publishing research in a few weeks that shows that children are still trying to find porn, but half of them are ending up on a site that's got age checks. So half of children protected in a way that they weren't the previous year. So it's not enough, but it's very quick and significant change. Now, why has our approach worked in the UK? What is it that we did that was a bit different from what some other jurisdictions had done? We were flexible about how it could be done. We said it must be done, it must be privacy preserving, it must be fair, it must protect data, etc., but you choose. So we've seen innovation. We've seen massive innovation in facial recognition. It's now way better than it was a few years ago. It is harder at 16 than 18. But we've also seen systems that we didn't know about until we began on this journey, like verification through email. Turns out that there are companies that analyze your email traffic, and if they can see that you've got a life insurance policy or a credit card, then they know you're over 18. You get a tick. Nothing else needs to be done. Very, very unintrusive background checks on individual accounts. So we will be publishing a report on all this in October. These are live systems that turns out people are trading on this without us kind of maybe even knowing. We will be publishing a report on this in October. It's harder at 16, partly because the age checks are not quite as technologically good yet, because kids look different at that age more than they do at 18. It's a little bit more stable at 18. But the main reason it's a bit harder is that you haven't got external verification like, do you have a credit card? Yes, no. Are you over 18? You haven't got those things in place, certainly in my country at 16, in quite the same way. So you've not got as much to piggyback on in building your systems. But can it be done? Absolutely. Will it need to be more layered up to the operating system level? Yes, it will. We are very encouraged by what Apple in particular has done in the last few months, introducing more sophisticated systems. They did it in the UK first, along with Brazil and Australia, because they know that we get it and we're interested in age assurance systems. So I think in another couple of years, we'll be in a different place. And that then allows the flexibility that Jeremy was talking about for countries to choose. Am I banning particular services, or am I just banning functionalities or types of content like pornography? But none of this would be happening without regulation, because Silicon Valley has not been interested in knowing who their younger users are. They've had to have this forced on them. So there is still an uphill battle to get there.
Thank you, Melanie. So you're talking about flexibility, and you sound pretty optimistic that it's going to work. So
it can be done.
It can be done. Okay. So maybe Renate, maybe you could talk about the solution at EU level or national level, and tell us how flexible that system could be, and how you see the issue.
I think if you're going for an social media delay or an age gate, it's absolutely important to have a verified kind of age verification system. I think the Australian example shows that if you don't have you only have the one without the other, there's huge circumvention, and it's not really effective. So that's why in the European Union, we are discussing a different approach. We really want to kind of, use the digital wallet development, that we will all move towards, having a digital wallet with an architecture that is secure and privacy friendly, with the best technology and the zero knowledge proof kind of technology to really be privacy kind of aware. And we want to kind of use that as an age verification model. That's what we launched a year ago with some pioneering member states. There are more now. And I think that's an important standard that we might want to kind of develop. It's early days, but again, in the debates with the member states, it's very clear that also there, member states are aware of the single market effect. We have the background of our COVID certificate experience from the COVID times, where the interoperability built into that COVID certificate allowed us to really to have a single market, even in a very difficult context. And I think it's that same spirit that I'm seeing on the age verification debate. Is that the only way? Probably not. Can there be other market solutions? Probably yes. Can the operating system be a player in this? Probably yes. We are in very close contact with Apple and Google, and they are indeed making good progress, but I don't want to get the platform off the hook. And that's why I think it is really important to really also get them into this kind of game. Melanie talked about the adult content platforms, of course, because they're saying this is content only for plus 18-year-old ones. Well, if you don't have an efficient age verification system, how do you do that? So I'm quite happy about this debate, that when we are talking about, what's next after the expert panel? What's next in the European Union on minor protection online? We're not only talking about the age gate, we're also talking about an age verification system, because it is the important kind of partner if you really want to make it work.
Thank you. Jeremy, would you like to add anything at this stage about age verification and what your experience is about that?
Yeah, maybe just make 2 points. First of all, I want to tell you about the best day I've had in Coimisiún Meán, which was after we introduced our online safety code.
Yeah.
One of the conditions in the online safety code was that any platform, any video sharing platform that permitted pornography or gratuitous violence should have effective age assurance to prevent children seeing it. And this came into force on a Monday. We only had 2 platforms that permitted this content. Tumblr changed its terms and conditions to stop the content. We couldn't see anything on X making any changes at all. We wrote them a rather stinking letter on the Wednesday. On the Saturday morning, when I was using my burner account to look for porn on Twitter, which is something I kind of have to explain at home rather carefully. But something came up saying, we can't show you this because we need to verify your age. So this was like a really
Concrete,
good day. Yeah. And it was, it showed 2 things. I think one was the importance of having clear, bright line binding rules rather than guidelines. It's hard. People in trust and safety tell us it's hard for them to persuade the commercial people to abide by guidelines. It's much easier to persuade them to abide by binding rules. But since then, although I had a great day that day, we're looking at is it really good enough? So, and we're developing a set of, we're doing quite a bit of work on what good looks like in effectiveness of age assurance. The other thing I was going to just talk about was beyond Europe and the international dimension here. So when I talk to people in the United States, even in the Trump administration, or you talk to people in Asia, the concerns about children's online safety are the same. And people are very up for having consistent global standards about what a safe service means. They are also up for having consistent global standards for what privacy protecting effective age assurance means. So I think there really is an opportunity, not just in Europe, but globally to do this. And Renate talked about, and Melanie talked about the app stores. Of course, this can be done efficiently as well. The responsibility has to be with the platforms, but there is absolutely efficient and effective ways that can involve service providers, possibly the app stores. And there's definitely a role for, say, the EU in solving what's kind of a coordination problem here. How do we make sure that this can be done effectively? So that's just my 2 pennyworth on age assurance.
Super interesting questions. Did either of you want to respond to what Jeremy's just said? So international coordination and no? Okay.
I mean, only to say that I agree. I mean, that's why I also kind of mentioned in my introductory remarks the G7 digital ministers kind of statement. I really wouldn't underestimate the importance of that in the current geopolitical context. And indeed, I think even on the other side of the Atlantic, with the Trump administration, when you're talking about people like Sarah Rogers, who is playing an important role these days on minor protection online, there is absolutely a willingness to engage also on that. And when you see at the kind of the private litigation that is happening in the US, that's just another way of kind of addressing the same system.
Exactly.
And, when I'm in my discussions with Meta, for instance, who is exposed a lot to that kind of litigation in the US, the private litigation, of course, it's the same issues that we are dealing with in our enforcement actions on the DSA and that they are facing in the litigation in the US.
Okay, thank you. Melanie?
I think you wanted to talk about international coordination anyway, so I will come in. I mean, yes, we need more of it. There's another conference going on this week in Boston, which I went to last year, which is International Data Protection Community. And there's so many of them, like hundreds and hundreds of international data experts in industry. It's so much more mature. Online safety is still terribly, terribly new. And we have a lot still to do. Can I just say a little bit, one final thing? People tend to say, particularly Americans say, America innovates, Europe regulates. Well, I would add, actually, America litigates. And that's what we're now seeing. And we are seeing liability changing. And it's got a way to go through the system yet. I mean, maybe they'll legislate as well. But, actually in their system, it tends to be more about private action in the courts. So I think things are on the move, which is interesting, and we're all playing our part in different ways.
Yeah, and I'd like to add as well that, I mean, we could be litigating as well in the EU, because, I mean, in fact, our legislation doesn't prevent, public enforcement, doesn't prevent private enforcement. So just to get back quickly, I mean, I know time is running out and I hate it because I'd love to talk for hours, but this business of, I mean, what about VPNs? And I mean, we read in papers all the time, there's a VPN surges, all the time, and it's happening in the UK now, and it happened for the porn age verification. So do we need something about VPNs? And then the other technical question I had a bit more was about, I mean, okay, age verification at the operating system. Is the legislation able to, put that on operating systems as we stand at the moment, or do we need legislation, again, regulation? Or is this something, how do you see it? Is this something that they will be doing naturally? Or so first question, maybe on, what was it? On, what? VPN. Sorry. Thank you. You go first.
Yeah, look, VPNs are a tool of circumvention for age gates. They are also a great asset as part of the way that the modern internet works. And so I think this is something that needs to be put on the table and talked through. And when it comes to that, or operating system controls, I'd say the same thing, really. I think there's something for the industry to now work out. If a company like Meta can detect VPN use, or Pornhub or whoever, and do something about it at their level, then there's less need to do something at the VPN level, and less need to regulate the entire internet and increasing sort of niche parts of it. But, there are certainly people in my country talking about age gating VPNs, for example. That would be one solution. But that and the operating system controls, I think, I would say as a regulator, don't regulate unless you need to, for goodness sake. I'm usually asked to do more. In fact, I'm never asked to do less when I'm back in London. So we will have more laws, and I'll be asked to enforce them. But if the industry can get there on its own, then you'll usually get there quicker.
I can see you're nodding, but please keep going. you
Really, just to echo, I don't think there's a need for further legislation on that. Really not. I also think we shouldn't underestimate where VPN is really important. We also have autocratic regimes where, the only way to get access to the internet is via. I really would caution against kind of, this is too much of a black and white kind of, discussion here. There will always be kind of geeks who will just, go around a kind of a violation, a prohibition. That's also the fact in offline realities. So why shouldn't that be different? Why should that be different in online realities? But on the operating system, as I said, for me, the main kind of target also on my enforcement work is the platforms at the moment when it comes to kind of their due diligence obligations under the DSA. But of course, we also look at the operating system under the DMA. I'm not excluding anything, but, there was a moment where certain platforms said, it should all be done by the operating system. This was mainly to kind of, I have nothing to do with that. And that's exactly, I think we all hated that. And that's not good enough for us. So, but, I'm with, Melanie, and I think we all agree here that, technology might also help us. Technology standards might kind of evolve further. Business models will certainly adapt. We're seeing it already because of our enforcement work, and we're only at the beginning of it. So I'm convinced that, the models that we see today will not be exactly the same that we will be talking about in 3 to 5 years. And hopefully they will be much better in terms of the safety of the consumers, the kind of safety also of the minors online.
Let's make a comment about VPNs, which is the demand for VPNs occurs when you ban whole categories of service. If the ban allows for safe services for children to be available without a VPN, then the incentive to get round that is much reduced if we do that well. And the other thing, just coming back to the international thing, if we have international coordination so that the similar rules apply everywhere in the world, then a VPN won't in fact help you. There'll be no point in a VPN because wherever you go will be services with similar rules. And on the app stores, I would say there's a huge market opportunity for the app stores and the operating systems if we have rules about effective age verification on platforms, that creates an economic incentive for people who are in a position to help platforms do that in an efficient, privacy-preserving way. And we can probably rely on market solutions to drive that rather than needing regulation.
It's all about economic incentives in the end. Philippe will be pleased with that. So maybe just to wrap up this panel discussion, could you perhaps each of you in a very, succinct, simple way and quick way, tell us what your biggest challenge is as a regulator in this space, of enforcing and supervising the big tech in relation to protection of minors? What's the biggest?
Go from left to right. Managing expectations. I am my board at OFCOM because we're an independent corporation and we're not part of the government. We've always been clear for 4 or 5 years that the online safety task, this was the big challenge, because expectations are rightly, as I was saying earlier, so high because people are so worried. And it's not just kids, of course, it's also adults, and particularly gender-based abuse online and so on. And regulation takes time, and it took time for the laws to pass. We had to produce codes. We have 100 services under investigation at the moment. It's absolutely massive. We've had some real wins, but actually telling that story is really, really hard. But all you can do is just, get on with it. And it's something I talk to Gillian Mangrant quite a lot about, because I think, actually as regulators in the public eye, in our countries, it's quite tough politically, but it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. So, it works out in the end.
Good. Now,
I think after 2.5 years, I would say have the right pipeline of cases structured so that you really kind of deliver. I think Melanie has a really important point about managing expectation. I mean, my experience and also talking about it a lot publicly is, for some, we are doing too much. For others, we're doing too little. I'm going to the parliament after this. There, we're doing too little. When I'm kind of, in other fora, we're doing too much. But I think it's really important to kind of be clear about what are the priorities we are addressing, because there's a lot that we can do. Indeed, violence against women, a lot. But I think what really worked for us in the 2.5 years was to focus on minor protection online, to focus on safety of online marketplaces, to focus on the key kind of user empowerment feature, such as, the notice in action, the kind of, the accessibility to data. So that was a very good kind of guideline. But of course, we will have to develop that further. But really to produce a pipeline of cases where you can show, and this is very much what we are trying to get at, every month there is something coming out of the DSA machine, so to say. That's kind of how you kind of become a credible actor as a relatively young kind of digital regulator. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, I think our biggest challenge was we didn't know enough. We were new regulators and we were not experts in this space. We've done a huge amount of engagement with academia, with civil society. We really know much more. So I think now the challenge is to take that knowledge and turn it into some bright line rules as well. So I think, when the DSA or the Online Safety Code were conceived, it was in an environment where we felt that maybe the platforms would be somewhat cooperative. What we found is, every step of the way, we're in court with them. Then, they are being dragged kicking and screaming to comply. And so I think the time has come to have more binding specific rules as well as the kind of more risk-based approach. I think we found that the Irish Online Safety Code has achieved that. That's been really good. I think the talk about social media bans is another step in that direction. So I think if we make use of, so like the DMA has binding rules for gatekeepers. So I think that is a regulatory tool that we need to use more of now.
Okay, well, is this on? Yes. Well, I think we should stop here because I'm going to get told off by my colleagues. So thank you so much for being here, and a big round of applause for my fellow chairs. Thank you. Thank you.